Earlier in this chapter, when we were in it last time, we learned that by believing in Jesus, believing in his word, the word he's spoken, that you're already clean. If you believe in Jesus this morning, you have real living faith in Jesus, then he's already taken away your sin. That's great news, but then he says those who truly believe will live out that faith. And bearing fruit was one of the things we looked at last time. So what is this bearing fruit? Well, it starts with love. Read verse 9 again with me. John 15, verse 9. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you obey my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have obeyed my Father's commands and remain in his love. So hang on a minute, is this about, okay, by faith you get in, and now you just got to obey enough to show that you can keep up with God and keep this relationship? Now, what is being expressed here is the heart issue of faith. Has your heart been changed? Do you love God? We know we don't perfectly keep the commandments and never could. So he can't mean that. But what does he mean? It has to mean something. And what he's speaking about here in the relationship of the commands, something that we don't really think about very often, is they're connected with love. Because the commands actually reflect the character of God. Who is God? Who is this God that created this world and gave us life? Well, if you go through those commands, you can see some of who he is. He's a God who you shall not murder. He doesn't take life unlawfully. You shall not commit adultery. He's always faithful. You shall not steal. He never takes anything that which is not his own. You shall not lie. He's the God of truth. He is the truth. You shall not covet. He's the God who never ever covets anything beyond who he is. Unlike us, when we're coveting and wanting to lift ourselves up, God never wants anything beyond himself. The commandments are a reflection of who God is in his heart. So this is actually about a love relationship. It's not about, God, I obey these things, and you're already clean, remember, if you've believed. But a heart response is going to be a response of love. And here he is telling us how to love. How to love. It's obey my commands. So, to use an analogy I think I've used before, if you're married, you don't fall in and out of marriage depending on how you feel about that love today, whether it's up or down, or whether you feel more love for your spouse this week than next week. You now go, whoops, I'm not married anymore. Whoops, I'm back into marriage, I'm out of marriage. No, it doesn't work like that, does it? Marriage is something, a commitment that's made totally independent of how you feel today. And it's the same with salvation. It's found in faith in Jesus Christ and what he did on the cross to take away your sin. And you don't fall in and out of how am I doing, am I right with God today? He already made you right if you have faith in him. But how do you express that love? What's the right response? Just like in a marriage, when you have those times where you're not feeling the love, when you're not feeling those romantic feelings or whatever, you're not perhaps expressing love as you should. You're perhaps not showing the other the love that you should. Then your relationship is not going to be as healthy as it should. It's not going to be growing as it should. And that's the same with the Christian walk. everyone here who's got true faith and living faith in Jesus is saved. But the strength of your relationship, the health of your relationship with God will depend on whether you're taking seriously this way of loving God through his commands. And so too, if we reject love for God by deliberately disobeying commands, you're distancing yourself from love. And your love will grow cold. So, God is not the policeman looking up from the sky going, are you showing enough love yet? How are you saved? Not because you loved him, but because he loved you in giving his son for you. But this is actually about God wanting to grow that relationship of love. And that relationship of love is expressed. He's actually saying, I want to do more than just grow the relationship. I actually want to bless you. Did you notice that in verse 11? I have told you this. I'm telling you how to love God, obey his commands. I've told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. Now, this is nuts. According to what everybody in the world believes, because everybody in the world thinks commands, God's right and wrong, restriction, taking away our freedom. I had one unbelieving lady tell me, it sounds so authoritarian, all these commands you got to keep, all these, it's a restriction of our freedom, and that sacrificial system in the Old Testament, that's appalling. Well, actually, when you understand what that sacrificial system in the Old Testament is, it's pointing to the greatest act of love this world has ever known. It's pointing to Jesus' death on the cross, giving his life for us. So too with the commands of God. They are love as well. They are God wanting to bless us and love us, and so that we can grow in this relationship of love. This is not God saying, well, look, I saved you. Now you've got to just love me enough and show me the commands to measure up. Now this is God wanting to grow in this relationship of love with us. And let's read verse 11 again. I can scarcely believe this. He's saying, I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. So we obey the commands of God primarily to glorify God, to love God, but here he's saying there's something else. There's something else. I want to actually bring you more joy. I want your joy to be complete. I want my joy to be in you. How do we do that, God? Obey the commands. This is amazing. See, the commands of God, as we've just established, are about the character of who God is, the person of God. Then to get more into the commands of God, what's going to happen? The very thing that we were predestined for, what did he say? You were predestined to be conformed to the likeness of God's Son. So this is when we use the word sanctification. Sanctification, it means we're becoming more holy. That's the plan of God. That's what he's got you here for. How come he didn't just take you off this earth right now? Have you had enough already? Well, no, God says, no, you haven't had enough. I'm keeping you here for a bit. Why? I've got some more transforming to do in you. I've got some more transforming to do in you. How? By obeying the commands of God, you're going to become more like Jesus. That was his plan. To be transformed in the likeness of God's Son. So he uses the commands to do that as well, so that you can have your joy complete. And this is the abundant life that Jesus spoke about earlier in this gospel, John 10 verse 10. thief comes only to steal, kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and life to the full. How? Through the commands that are actually enabling us to participate in who God is, get to know God more. So every time you think, but hang on, if I'm obeying this command over here, I'm going to miss out. That would restrict me. Or, if I obey that command, I won't have the same freedom to do what I want to do. And it doesn't feel like joy. It feels like I'm missing out. And here's a question for you. Who are we going to believe? You or God? Because that's our feelings can tell us, no, I really need this. It's like little children. If you just gave them a choice, look, you want to, eat the chocolate, right, for breakfast, lunch and dinner, right, every meal for the rest of your life, or have all this, or have Brussels sprouts and, all that other ugly stuff, right, which I eat every day. Which one do you want? Which one do you want? Yeah, they'll go for the good stuff, right? But the good stuff is not the good stuff. The good stuff is not the good stuff. That's the same with God. And why is he saying this? So I can keep a hand on you so you don't go out? No, so that your joy may be complete, said Jesus. So this is not just some blind, arbitrary rules that just God says, look, this is what you've got to do. This is actually meant to bless you. Read Psalm 119 verse 2. Bless, keep his statutes and seek him with all heart. And that's that heart issue again. It's about your heart. Matthew 5:6. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. So we've got blessing, joy, filled. Have we missed something? Have we missed something here? When we look at him saying that, the commands, obey the commands, and has sin so warped our perception that we think the commands, are over here and the good stuff is the chocolate, right? Have we missed something? Like the scripture's saying that this is the way that's good. God's way is good. But our feelings tell us, no, I don't like that. I think this way is better. I think I'll make a good time if I'm going with this. I remember when I was a young bloke, teenager, and got my licence, moved from the country, driving down from the country to the eastern suburbs, try and make way through, getting lost, no GPS, getting lost. I get lost with the GPS, but anyway, getting lost, and coming along, suddenly I come to this freeway, and back then there weren't many freeways, and I'm thinking, look, that might be slightly out of the way, but it's sort of in a general direction. Oh, God, and I'm flying along this freeway going, wow, really making good time. This is great. And then I finally realised the end of it, I'd driven all the way back into the city, and I wasn't making good time. I felt like I was making good time. I don't care how good you're flying along, how good it feels. If you're going in the wrong direction, it ain't going to be joy in the end. You're just going to have to turn around and come all the way back and start heading in the right direction. Don't trust your feelings. Anyone here doesn't agree that they're a sinner? If we're sinners, we're not perfect, we haven't got it all together. Could it be that God knows more than what we do when it comes to the right direction of our life? Now, that complete joy that he's speaking about includes what we looked at last time, includes some pruning. Some of it might be a bit painful along the way. Some of it might be a little bit difficult and hard. There might be hard times. There might be boundaries set. It might mean restriction on things that you think that chocolate would be so good for you. But this is all so that your joy may be complete. You know, I'm not a big fan of that evangelism line, you know, come to Jesus and he has a wonderful plan for your life, and, you know, God has a wonderful plan for your life, and, you know, all that sort of stuff. And, hey, how about the fact that you're a sinner if you don't repent? You know, everything in your life will work together for bad and you're going to end up in hell. I don't think that's a wonderful plan, quite frankly. Doesn't sound like a wonderful plan to me. But the amazing thing is that if you take that step of faith and say, I'm going to follow you, Jesus, you were right and I was wrong, that he does actually have a wonderful plan for those who believe in him. But it's going to include some hardships. It's going to include some pruning. It's going to include some discipline. What, I have to give up that, or I have to do this? But it will be the wonderful plan that God has for you, for this life and the life to come. You know, it seems strange to us because the world seems to think that if you look after number one, that's what's it's got to be best for you. If you take care of yourself first, and then you're in a position to love other people. If you love yourself first and you do good for yourself. But that's the exact opposite of what Jesus is getting at here. Have a look what he says in verse 12. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. Now, that sounds good, but when you really start thinking about what does that really mean? How do you and I love each other as Jesus loved us? How did Jesus love us? When he was on that cross, when he chose to get up on that cross to take the penalty for your sin, for the things you've done wrong, when he got up on that cross, was he knew your heart. He knew in advance who you were. Was he looking there and thinking, yeah, not too bad. Might have made a few little mistakes there, but pretty lovable. Yeah, look, I'll die for them. That ain't what he was thinking. He loved in action despite how he felt about us. The scripture says we were objects of God's wrath, his anger. And yet somewhere in the being of God was also a compassion that said, despite how I feel about what they've done to me, defacing me, trampling on the commands, despite that, I'm going to love. That's what Christian love is. That's what it's talking about in this text when Jesus said, you've got to love as I have loved you. Just think right now about the person in your life that's most difficult to love right now, because they may have done harm to you, they may have hurt you, may have done evil. How are you going to love them? Well, it ain't going to be by feeling warm and fuzzy about them, because you don't feel that for them. You don't feel it at all. So how are you going to love as Jesus loved? Well, the way to Jesus love is a commitment to love, to act in love before independent of whether it's a feeling. To commit in love, that's what Jesus did. I'm going to love you despite what you've done to me. Not because I'm feeling it. I'm going to act in love. An action, a commitment before it's a feeling. That's the kind of love that Jesus is talking about. When you can think of that person and you have to pray, even though you haven't thought to pray this, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. Oh, but they do know what they're doing. No, they don't. No, they don't. You know what they're doing, because you're so smart. But they do not know what they're doing. That's the way Jesus loved us. Those are the words from the cross, aren't they? That Jesus cried out. Read verse 14 with me. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I've called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. This is amazing, because here we've got the God of the universe. Really need to study other religions to realise how foreign this concept is, that God himself would come down personally to try and save us, to reach out to us, instead of in other religions where each thing you're trying to do is to reach up to God. We're trying to reach up to God. We're trying to make sacrifice to reach up to appease God. But this is God who comes down to us. But then here's the most amazing thing. He comes and saves us, and then he calls you a friend. God? Your friend? Anybody short of friends? Real friends? People let you down? This is a true friend. And this puts a whole new light on everything Jesus is saying about if you love me, you'll obey my commands. And I'll prune you, and all these sorts of things. This is coming from a friend who gave his life for you to say, I want to make your life complete. I want to make your joy complete. I want to do good for you. I want you to grow in this love with me. This is how to go about it. And again, where's your heart at? That's what he's looking for in this. We've already established you can't be talking about, well, you've got to obey enough to measure up. But is your heart for Jesus and go, yeah, I love what he did for me. And if he says this is what's loving in return, a responsive love, then that's what I want to do. I want to go his way. What the world sees as restriction is actually Jesus being a friend of sinners coming to make our joy complete. We need to read the Gospels again. Go through all those different ways where you see Jesus was a friend to sinners, to people that even his own disciples going, Lord, leave these guys alone, will you? Jesus goes to them, to the people that no one else wants to know. Remember Zacchaeus, the guy who made all that money out of tax collecting. Jesus comes to him and says, I'm going to eat at your house. And the Pharisees are going, no, what's he doing sitting down with a sinner like that? And we read that and we go, yeah, those Pharisees are so judgmental, How could they speak like that? Jesus going sitting with a sinner. But hey, it wasn't you who was ripped off by this Zacchaeus and all of your savings and your pay packet are going into his luxurious Jerusalem apartment, It's like, this guy was a shyster. This guy was ripping off people. That's what tax collectors did. They were hated by the Jewish people, number one, because they were traitors to the nation, working for the Romans to collect taxes. But then there was no accounting. So what they did was they took more taxes than they had to and put the rest in their pockets, and that's why they were so rich. Zacchaeus was a rich man. And Jesus is going to sit down with him? This guy's a criminal. He should be distancing himself from criminals. That's exactly what Jesus did. He became the friend of sinners. And he goes further, doesn't he? He lays down his life for his friends. If you believe in Jesus this morning, then you are a friend of Jesus. Jesus is your friend. Do you think this friend is going to lay a heavy burden on you through the commands of God that are going to be just to keep you in line? This is a friend we're talking about. You think he's going to give you stuff just to make you miss out? But it looks like I will miss out. Yeah, but do you think it's going to be for your bad? The friend who only wants the best for us. I can ask the children a question. You got enough friends? You want to find a real friend? You haven't got enough friends? Jesus is willing to be your friend. But do you want to be his friend? Have a look at verse 14. You are my friends if you do what I command. So if your heart is truly touched by this friendship of the Lord laying down his life, your natural response is not a work salvation, I've got to do enough, but the natural response to friendship is to do what he says. Because friendship is a two-way thing, isn't it? It doesn't mean freedom to walk all over the other person. We don't go, oh yeah, I believe in Jesus, so now I'll just go and live my life the way I want to, even though it's trampling all over the cross. That's not friendship. That's not love. That's not a heart that's been changed to have living faith. And remember, from the time we looked at this chapter, this whole speech is really Jesus' final speech to his disciples to tell them about the mission that he has for them to go into the whole world. Look at verse 16 again. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit, fruit that will last. Then the Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. So I chose you, I appointed you to go. This is John's version of what Matthew has at the end of his gospel, where Jesus commissions the disciples, go and make disciples of all nations. That's the primary fruit bearing. I appointed you to go. So if this is about mission, about Jesus telling the disciples to go, then why all this stuff about love for God, love for one another, character in your Christian walk, and all these sorts of things? Why, if it's about, going and evangelising, what do we need to know all this stuff? Because they're tied together. The way you live, the way you act, the way you love will affect those on the outside. They'll see it. People constantly, and it's sad that people judge Christianity by Christians instead of Christ. It's crazy, but it's true. And Jesus knew it in advance. That's exactly why he puts it this way. Right involved with the mission is how you will love one another, because the world knows it's easy to love people who love you. But when people are difficult, when people are hard to love, only someone with the Holy Spirit who's seen what Jesus, how he loved me in action, not in feelings, in action. Only that gives you the power to be able to love this way. And that is exactly the kind of thing that attracts people to say, so what is this Christianity? There's something about you that I want to know what it is you have. And that's, again, Jesus' words earlier in this gospel about all people will know you're my disciples if you have love for one another. It was earlier in this chapter, in verse 8, this is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. People want to know, does this faith actually work? And he finishes off with the big one, that we can all actually be involved in this mission. How is that? Read verse 16 again with me. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit that will last. Then the Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. So there's something. Now, we might not all be called to be door-knocking evangelists or something, but we can all play a part in the mission. In one way, at least, right in here, we can all pray. Did you see that? Or did you miss it? It just keeps repeating it. In fact, you're going to be sitting there thinking, is this pastor going to be going on about prayer again? And didn't we do that last week and the week before? And mention the prayer meetings and, prayer. Stop right there. It's not me, it's Jesus. He keeps going on about it. He didn't stop. He's bringing it up again. Just in the last chapter, he was talking about this wonderful promise. Ask me, and I will do it. You'll do greater things than these through prayer, through asking me. And here he is saying it all again. It was earlier in this chapter in verse 7. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be given you. That's extraordinary. He would say such a thing. Ask. It's in the context of the mission, of people. It's in the context, let's just bring it down to reality. It's in the context of when you have your time in prayer, who are you praying for? And are you believing that God is able? That's what he's talking about. And it's the same thing in our text today in verse 16 again. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit that will last. Then the Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. Why does Jesus keep going on about prayer all the time? Could it be because we haven't got it yet? I can read over these verses. Ask, that's good. Does that stir you to just want to set the alarm a bit earlier and get up earlier so I can pray more? Wow, he's telling me I can ask and it will be given. Want to bear fruit? Yeah, I want to bear fruit. You've got to pray. There for the taking. But will the Son of Man find faith? Those who persevere in it. Those who keep going. Or we'll go, tried it for a couple of weeks, didn't work. The least attended meeting in any church is always the prayer meeting. Why? Because Christians, same as everybody else in most cases, they just go, oh, what do I get out of that one? Yeah, not much, I'll skip that one. So that's the least attended meeting in any church. But this is the opposite philosophy of Jesus, who lays down his life for others and says, just ask. Just ask. And watch Jesus make your joy complete. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit that will last. Then the Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. Amen.